Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark.
Welcome to the Night, Volume 1, Story 1. I was a sophomore in high school. I stayed the night with my best friend John on a Friday night in the fall of 1991. We decided to sneak out and meet up with his girlfriend at the time and two other girls. For some reason, I decided to bring along this old knife. He had about the size of a junglist and stuffed it in the pocket of the hoodie I had on. Being that the neighborhood was a 10-minute walk from each other and all, we met up with him and proceeded to wander to John's girls' neighborhood. As we entered the neighborhood through the woods, we came upon a house that had a white van parked in front, and Erin, John's girl, said, "That van doesn't belong there." So John and I decided to investigate. As we approached the van, it sped off, leaving us standing there. Just then, the homeowner came running out accusing us of trying to break in his house. An officer in the Marines, and he was very upset. We explained it wasn't us, and a van left as we came up. He was cool with that and left to call the police. We started walking down to Erin's house, and the van circled back around and approached us from our six. It slowly passed and sped off. I yelled obscenities at it and it left. A few minutes later it came back on our six, stopped next to us and opened the sliding door. Reached out for me and somehow I drew that blade and swung it at the guy reaching out. The van sped off. We were all spooked and ran between houses and ended up on another street headed for a cul-de-sac. Sitting at the beginning of the road was the van with headlights off, seeing us as it came towards us. At the end of it was a group of trees that overlooked the main road we entered on. We ran into the trees and the van left. We sat there and watched. All of us were shaking and felt trapped. As we were sitting there watching, the van came back around twice, slowly scanning the areas. About 10 or 15 minutes in between trips. After the second trip, the sheriff deputy came by in the same direction. Feeling a little easier now, we eased our nerves. Then the van came back, and then the deputy not long after. We waited another 20 to 30 minutes, and seeing no cars coming, we walked the girls to their house, and we hightailed it to John's house. A few weeks later in the paper there was a story about a group of guys breaking into houses and robbing them while they slept. They posted pics of the guys, and lo and behold, one of the pics was of the guy who'd reach out to grab me. It's funny thinking about it now, and every time John and I talk, we relive that story and what might have happened. Story number 2. This happened a few years back. I'd almost forgotten about it for a while, until something I read today sparked my memory. Back when I was 14 or 15, about maybe 10, 15 years ago, my cousin and I would run around the woods pretty much every day after school. In the late summer, early fall, we would have a good 4 to 5 hours to explore before it got dark. We were going through a particular stretch of woods this one evening that was relatively untraveled by us. It was further away and didn't have many landmarks that made it worthy of the hike there, often like rivers, caves, and cliffs, things like that. It was pretty much just wilderness. We decided that we would dedicate more time to learning this stretch of woods, though. We knew all the local areas very well and thought we would learn this one as well so that we could say that we did. We made our way out there as soon as school let out on an early September day. My cousin hopped off the bus at my house with me and off we went. We made it there as quick as we could so that we could try to identify anything interesting about the area. We basically stuck together. We wandered off here and there but never strayed too far from each other. The land was pretty much the way we thought it was, filled with rolling hills, pine, hemlock, and oak trees. We pressed on though. This is where it got interesting. We came to an old dump where the woods opened up. This wasn't a trash dump, but more of where old machinery went to die kind of dump. There was a tractor, a few random metal machines that I really couldn't identify. There was also an old bus. When we were looking at this from a distance, but being 15, we decided that the best idea would be to absolutely investigate all of these things. As we got closer, we slowed down to check out the area. It didn't appear that anyone visited this place frequently, and that all the machines and vehicles had been there for many years. Just then, as we were scoping it out, a guy burst out of the bus door. We ducked behind some trees and peered from behind them to check out what this guy was up to. This guy was whacked out. We could tell as soon as we saw him. He had a crazy look in his eyes, and he was mumbling and blabbing to himself constantly. He just looked gone, if you know what I mean. It's hard to explain, but he just looked like a psychopath. He also looked as if he hadn't showered in weeks. Being kids, we were admittedly creeped out, but we hung in there. The guy tinkered with some machines and moved some stuff around. Then he moved in the opposite direction from where we came. We could hear his walking slowly fade into the background as he descended further and further away. We wondered if he had heard us approach, and if that was the reason he'd appeared to burst out of the bus so suddenly. Either way, we decided that we would take a quick peek in the bus to see what he had been up to. We scrambled to the door, planning to only take a 30-second peek and then get back out of there and move out of the area in case he came back. We got to the door and it smelled horrible in there. A few seats had been removed, and there were piles of blankets and a few pillows piled in there among other various junk. We ran out of there and back into the woods from where we came from. Once we got far enough away, we took a seat against a tree and pondered what we just saw. We were pretty positive that this guy had been living there. We also considered how ignorant that it was that we did get as close as we did. We wandered off and talked about the odd occurrence for a while. Now, fast forward 10 years. This is what reminded me of the story. I was on the internet just browsing during my lunch hour, and I see a press release from this county's sheriff's office. The same guy that we saw that day was arrested today on 6 felony charges. It didn't say what the charges were for, so I anxiously await for that news. The story was fairly creepy back when it happened, but being older and understanding how the world works more than I did back then, we were probably in a lot more danger than we even thought. Obviously, this guy was willing to commit 6 felonies. So lucky for us that we were not spotted on that day, or who knows what could have happened. Anyways, when I saw that story online today, it reminded me of this encounter in the woods many years ago. Next story. When I was a kid, we were always outdoors exploring in one way or another. There were a number of old ghost town sites we'd found in a few old mining plots from the late 1800s and turn of the century era. And one of the mining towns we were looking through was a saloon. Most of the second floor had caved in along with the roof, but a friend of my dad found a silver dollar where part of the floor had rotted out and part of an old dress sticking out from the debris that had come down from the second floor. It was all rotted away, but had 4 pink pearls beads sewn on what was still there. He was building a house at that time. When he built the fireplace, he inlaid that silver dollar and the 4 pearls around it in the masonry of the mantel. Afterwards, when the house was done, there would be instances where it was like someone walked by wearing a strong, sweet perfume that no one wore or could identify. Other times, it included something brushing someone's ear or cheek. We all came to the agreement that it was the woman who wore that dress with the pink pearl beads. Next story. This was in 2008, and I lived in Idaho. Anyway, we lived in a stupid subdivision at the base of the San Jacinto Mountains. Granted, it was a small housing tract, and a nice one, so it was not too bad. What made it bearable was our house sat at the edge of the Saboba Indian Reservation. Behind our 2-story house was a level bank for about 100 feet or so, then it dropped away to a very wide riverbank. The river runs in rainy seasons and is situated in a canyon with many big fat oak trees and various other species of trees. Lots of owls, coyotes, bobcat, etc. There was nothing but reservation behind our stone wall. The reservation stretches for a good many miles up the canyon, and my daughter, as well as some of her neighbor friends, like to go back there to play around. This canyon goes clear up the mountain to Idlewild. It gets more thick green and dense with trees and plants the higher up you travel. This night, I was upstairs doing laundry in my bedroom, and my husband was out of town working. I heard the front door slam, and I heard whoever it was come tearing up the stairs, and I got a bad, sick feeling of fear even before my 14-year-old daughter and stepdaughter were in my room. I looked at her, and she was shaking uncontrollably. It was white as a sheet. She couldn't even catch her breath. She's crying. My stepdaughter just had this deer-in-the-headlight look on her face. She kind of froze in place. Before I had a chance to ask what was wrong, I tore down the stairs to the front door and locked it. I just felt that I needed to lock it. I knew the rest of the house was locked, so I then went back upstairs, told the other two younger kids to keep playing, and went and got my pistol. I just needed to reassure myself and them that they were okay and there wouldn't be a way for someone to just waltz in after them. I was now ready to hear what had happened. The time it took to do all of that was maybe a couple of minutes. I got my daughter calm enough to tell me what the hell was wrong. My daughter, stepdaughter, and two neighbor kids were out by the riverbed down a ways from the house. To get to the river, you had to either walk out the front door and down the street, around the corner and to the dead end, hop over the guardrail, or climb up and over the 8-foot block stone wall. Once you are over the wall, unless you have a ladder or can run and jump really high, you have to go the way of the dead end to get back into the neighborhood. As they were back there hanging out and talking, one of the kids kept saying, "Do you hear that?" He thought he heard shuffling on the dirt and low groaning not far from where they were hanging out. Not long after, the kids said that something or someone started to throw rocks at them about the size of baseballs. They were landing close to the kids but not hitting them. They could see the rocks okay because the moon was pretty bright that night. They thought it was one of the kids' little brothers, so they all started to get up slowly, and then my daughter saw this thing stand up. According to her, it was super tall and looked shaggy, and that's when the other kids took off and left her there. It didn't take her long to follow suit, but before she took off, she said that it made funny sounds like grunting and huffing sounds. So she was the last in line and running as fast as she could. The neighbor boys ran off home, and she and my stepdaughter reached the guardrail last and got over it like they're jumping over a hurdle. As they reached the street, they looked back, and this tall, thin, shaggy-looking thing is just on the other side of the rail, still on the res side, and she told me it was rocking side to side. She kept going straight up to my room. I tried to get more detail, like if it looked like a crazy long-haired man, but she just said that when she saw it stand up from a hunch position after the second rock was tossed, it was so tall and the sound scared her so bad, as well as the fact that she was the last to react, that she didn't look until she was back on the neighborhood side. The reason she could see it rocking back and forth was because there was one last street light a little ways in front of the guardrail and dead end sign. It cast enough light that she could see it and told me that it was shaggy all over, that what she glimpsed did not look like a man. At this time, my stepdaughter, who was a couple of years older, just kept saying, "I don't know what it was." She was still freaked out, and about this time there was a knock on the door, and it was the neighbor boy's dad. They told him the same story, and he told me that he was going to check the end of the street. I felt safe with him. He was in the military and armed. I put my gun up, and we both went to have a look to see if we could see anything. The kids stayed inside with the door locked. When we got there, we didn't see anything, but the way all those kids looked and acted, I believe they saw something and were terrified. That night, I had all the kids sleep with me in my room, and I locked the house up super tight and strung little wires with bells and such along the inside windows and door frames. I locked my bedroom door and kept my window slightly open. I was on the second story that faced the riverbed and canyon, so I felt okay cracking my window so I could hear anything outside. That night I did not sleep much, and it was super quiet. I mean, nothing hooted or coyotes howled that night, and as they did every night. Even the bugs were quiet out there. It spooked me, but nothing like that ever happened again while we lived there, and the kids were forbidden to go back there again. I did not need to forbid them, though. They never wanted to go back. Next story. Back in the mid-1990s, I went on a fishing trip with 3 other men. To get to the lake, we had to journey 10 hours by car to a northern Ontario town. Once at the town, we caught a train that was heading to Western Canada. We rode that train for an hour and a half into the dense forest where the train stopped to let us out in the pitch black. The train then resumed its westward trek, leaving the 4 of us alone in the vast wilderness. This place was seriously remote with no vehicle access. We hauled our gear from the trackside a short distance to an open clearing where several cabins had been erected. We were the first visitors to this fishing camp that year, as the ice had gone, but only a few days before. No other guests were expected that week. We went to the cabin we were to be staying at. It was approximately 20 feet by 40 feet. Inside, it was completely open concept, no walls. Smack in the middle of the large room was a kitchen table and chairs. On the wall next to the door was a kitchen counter with sink and a stove, and on the opposite wall were 2 sets of bunks, each set with one bed positioned over the other. Rather than having a proper ladder to get to the top bunk, the person on top had to step onto the bottom bed and haul himself up on his own. We got settled and went to bed. Several days into our trip, after a particularly good afternoon of fishing and a hearty dinner, the others had settled down into a game of cards. I was feeling very tired, so I excused myself and climbed into my upper bunk to turn in for the night. I noticed to my dismay that the unshaded bright light bulb in the ceiling fixture that acted as illumination for the building was right in my line of sight. I rolled over to face away from it and fell asleep. Sometime later I awoke. The first thing I noticed was that the light was still on. I could hear nothing but snoring. They had all gone to bed and left the light on. I realized if I was going to get back to sleep, I needed to go and turn the light off. I was lying there pondering exactly how I was going to get down without disturbing the fellow on the bunk under me when I first heard it. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Heavy footsteps from somewhere outside the cabin. What the? There was no one else but the four of us around, and the only way in was by train. No trains had stopped since the one that brought us in. I looked at all three of the other bunks to confirm they were occupied, and sure enough they were. It wasn't one of the other guys in my group. I wasn't afraid, just curious and very tired, so I just lay there listening. The footsteps seemed to be coming from the direction of the front of the cabin, where the only door was. On the opposite wall, our bunks were on. I focused on the door and heard the footsteps grow louder with each slow step approaching the door. Just when they seemed to be right at the door, the footsteps stopped. Then the light went out. Then I heard the footsteps walk away from the cabin, the sound growing fainter until I could hear them no more. I fell asleep. The only light switch to control the inside ceiling light was on the inside of the cabin. The door never opened. When I got up the next morning, I checked around, but could find no evidence that anyone other than the four of us had been there. Next story. Back in the early 80s, my buddy and I were huge Star Wars fans, and The Empire Strikes Back had just been released. I was probably 11 and my buddy John was 12. He lived in a house with two huge oak trees in the backyard, and it was trimming time in our minds. We had just both got toy helicopters that sat on a launcher and would tear off into the sky as you pulled the strings. As we launched them, we'd scream, "The Ewoks!" as the copter would race up to the branches and knock the thinner small twigs loose. We did this over and over, screaming Star Wars lines till we got bored and moved on. The plan for that night was to sleep outside under the oak tree out in the open. John was always the leader between us since he was a year older and a grade ahead. I was happy to follow since he had great ideas and could kick some ass. I always felt secure and like a tough guy around him. We met at 5 and 6 when neither of us could cross the road. Him on one side and me on the other. Want to play kickball? Kicking the ball across the street to each other is how we met. Closest person to this day I have to a brother, and I'm 43 now. So, nightfall comes. John drags his bed mattress into the backyard. My mom would kill me, but John's way was way cool. And here we were chatting away, looking up at the night sky and the oak tree, and we thrashed in earlier that day. Stars were bright, and I was feeling pretty good, thinking, here I am, a tough guy sleeping outside. When suddenly, I see in the oak tree we had abused earlier, in the thick fork of the tree sitting, a fat green elf. I'm blinking, and my mind just can't comprehend what I'm seeing. Really? A fat elf? Really? A green fat elf? What the? Best way I can describe him is he had a green elf suit and green skin, but hazy kind of see-through, and a hat with a long tip that curled. Before words came to my mouth, John points and shouts, "An elf!" Suddenly, a few more pop up behind branches, but skinny. Then some more. Next thing I know, it's a frickin' Lucky Charms reunion party. There's probably 20 of them jumping from branch to branch. John frantically pointing to each one, his arm waving wildly about as they hop from branch to branch. I'm terrified with fear. Can't move, unable to speak. Faster and faster they jump from branch to branch. No sound, no physical stress on the branches, while the whole time the fat one just sits there and stares in his comfortable spot in the tree. As they work up a speed where they're probably almost invisible, they suddenly all stopped and stared at us. I remember their eyes, pure black, pure evil. The fat one then lifts his arm and points at us with his black eyes. John yells, "I'm out of here!" leaving me frozen with fear, unable to get up and run. Finally, my body responds, and I make it into the house. We tell his mom and cower on the back porch as she goes to look and retrieves the mattress. You guys gotta stop making this stuff up. She was a biker mama, so that's her. Years later, we're married and I bring it up in front of our wives. John gets a little embarrassed, and from what I can gather, his wife never knew. He describes everything I remember, but then he says he believed it was me they were after. I'm a Christian now and routinely pray over my house and bless it with olive oil. John thinks I'm nuts following Christ, but yet believes in green elves. Oh, whatever. Next story. I was born and grew up in southern North Carolina. I fished, hunted, and grew up outside for the most part. I've had run-ins with almost all known animals around my neck of the woods. My point is, I'm comfortable outdoors. I'm 6 feet, 225 pounds, and my friend in this story is 5'6", 180 pounds, and was a state champ wrestler. This happened back in March of 2016 at about 10 o'clock. My friend and I were fishing just below the dam on the Yadkin River near Ridgefield. For those who don't know, this is basically a Uwharrie National Forest. Us being the only people at the river after dark, we felt comfortable, so we had left earlier to go get a bite to eat, and had left the pole and our fish on the stringer down by the river in a somewhat hidden location. We pulled up to the parking area and sat for a few minutes before we got out of the truck, crossed the train tracks, and walked down the long L-shaped driveway to the river. Like so many others here, I had an odd feeling about the place, even though we had just been here previously. We walked along the river using my headlamp flashlight till we got to the pole and the stringer, which were right where we left them. We decided to move into the tree line to find another spot to fish. About 20 feet into the woods, we both hear footsteps from our left and stop. I immediately covered my headlamp and whispered, "Was it just me, or was that walking on 2 feet?" He looked at me and whispered back, "That was definitely on 2 feet." Just after he said it, we heard 2-leaf crunching steps, and I switched my headlamp to strobe to blind whatever it was. We didn't see anything yet, so I turned it off. Then 2 more footsteps that sounded closer. I switched it on full bright, and about 20 feet into the woods was a pair of bright yellow eyes staring back at us. As soon as the lights hit it, whatever it was ducked behind a tree to conceal itself. I covered the light for 2 seconds and then uncovered it. Whatever it was had crouched down and was beside the tree it had ducked behind. I dropped to one knee to get a better view, and we sat there watching one another for about 5 seconds. Then it went back behind a tree. We both yelled at it once, and it started to come closer, but we couldn't see it somehow. At that, we backed up as fast as possible and grabbed our stuff and left. Back at the truck, we didn't feel safe till we were moving down the road. We couldn't make out an outline other than the eyes. The eyes were too close together to have been human. We don't know what it was, but we both felt it didn't want us there. Next story. Anyway, my folks had about 100 acres in North Georgia that I moved to when I was 12. We farmed it and raised some animals, and I knew the land like the back of my hand. Never had any hesitation about grabbing a blanket and going to the back 40 to go sleep under the stars. Never had anything weird happen, or just didn't realize it when it did. I had 3 pastures that I had to keep cut, baled or bush hog, and sometimes they would get ahead of you. When the growth got so high you had to stand up on the tractor to see it was time to cut. I had a routine when I cut one particular pasture. I would always start at the very end, right in the middle, and go the entire length as straight as I could, just to get a feel for the ground. I would then go all the way around the outer border and make a couple of swaths to know how long it was going to take me to cut the whole thing. I ran up on deer, raccoons, beavers, muskrats, and a host of other animals. Ran over probably thousands of field mice. They make a special sound when the mower hits them. Anyway, there was a small growth of pines in the very middle of the pasture that got ahead of us, and ended up being big enough to hide some deer or some other wildlife in there, and you wouldn't know it till you were right up on it. It hid them well. So, about 5 years ago, I went up and saw that no one was cutting the pasture, and it had been undisturbed for quite some time. I hopped on the tractor and started across the pasture in low second gear, because it was thick. At this rate, it was going to take a while to cut. I was concentrating on what was in front of me, standing up and taking it slow, when I got to the center of the pasture, and all of a sudden, I got hit with a smell so bad I thought someone had dumped some illegal barrels of whatever out there. It was the most foul-smelling, noxious crap I had ever smelled. It just engulfed you and felt like it was poison. I was in pretty high grass and made a beeline for the other end of the pasture, just wanting to get some fresh air and relief. I got about 50 yards away and the smell stopped. I was thinking, what was that? I made a swath around the left side closest to the woods, and that's when that feeling hit me. I'd never felt it on our land before. There was something up in the woods watching me. I could feel it. I had goosebumps and my hairy ass arms were standing straight up. I tried to shake the feeling, but I kept having thoughts that something was about to come crashing out of those woods and snatch me off the tractor. I went a couple of 100 yards and the feeling kind of subsided a bit, and I thought, I'm going to see what the heck that was that made that smell on my next cut through the center. I slowly made it back to the center of the pasture and got to the smelly spot, and there was an area of grass that was matted down, and it looked like 3 or 4 horses had been rolling around in the grass. It was beat down flat, probably 20 by 20 feet, mashed down in the middle of the pasture. That's when I noticed on the side closest to me a big giant turd. I kid you not, this thing was the size of my forearm and would have damn near filled a 5-gallon bucket. My first thought was that some transients had made camp out there and had hunkered down for a night. But there was no trash, no nothing, just a couple of odd limbs and sticks and a massive turd. I didn't even see a trail leading out of it going towards the woods or the creek which borders the other side of the pasture. I was dumbfounded. I got to the other end and made my perimeter sweep and felt again that uneasy feeling. The more I cut, the further away from the woods I got, and the feeling got less and less as the day went on. Needless to say, I cut that pasture in record time and got the hell out of there. I still don't like getting around that area. Glad that it's rented out now and there are cattle grazing on it. For those of you wondering why I didn't stop and get a sample, would you have? I went back a few days later armed, but it was gone. I hope to never smell that smell again. Next story. This happened back in 1957 when Fort Irwin was Camp Irwin. My dad was stationed out there for his training. At about 4 a.m. he was with his platoon or his group. I'm not totally sure what you call it, but anyway, he had just stepped into the chow hall for breakfast. There were about 200 other men already sat down eating. It was still dark outside at this time. My dad had just walked in to get breakfast when another soldier came running in and yelled to all of them to come outside fast and look at this. My dad went back out and the guy is staring up at the sky. Dad looked up and sees several groups of round pulsating different colored lights that were in groups like of 4 or 5 lights bunched together but not touching, just hovering near each other close. He said there were about 7 of these groups and they were pretty high up. Dad told me that these lights could move at the same time from as far as he could see on the horizon until they disappeared, only to travel at an insanely fast speed back to the middle of the sky and come to a dead stop and just hover there. Then they would move again to the other side, disappear, and come back within seconds. Dad said looking at them, he felt a little fear, and watching them made his knees go weak. He said they left for about 5 minutes and never came back. My dad is 78 now, and when I ask him what he thinks they were, he has no idea, but did not believe that anything back then, man-made, could move across the sky that fast and maneuver the way these lights did. I love my dad. He was the most hard-working, intelligent, down-to-earth man. He's not the kind to make up anything. He has some crazy great hunting stories, but this is the strangest one so far. Next story. The setting is a neighborhood sometime around 1980, 1982, in a quiet area. One night, I was spending it at home. It was the friend of my home, who I'll call S, along with another friend, K. I won't post names because I don't know how they feel about sharing this, and haven't been in contact with them in long years. Anyway, the 3 of us were hanging around talking about this and that, listening to S play a song on her guitar. Her parents were home, but her brother was not. He was camping in some nearby hills with a friend. Significant later on, after a while the 3 of us decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. Quiet area, as I said, and pretty low crime, so we didn't worry. Plus S at least carried a small knife and I think Kay might have had one. Three of us anyway, we weren't concerned about bad people. We walked up and down the street, seeing literally no one, no moving cars, everything nice and quiet as was usual. There was a dog, a German Shepherd, who would bark when we passed, but this was his routine. S said he did that all the time, even though she walked there a lot. After a while, on one street, we started feeling a little unsettled. All three of us thought we were being followed, though still we saw no one and nothing. Few cars parked on the streets, nowhere really for anyone to hide, but the feeling was real. Then I heard what sounded like dog paws on pavement. Anyone with a dog knows the sound. Unmistakable sound, and seemed to be approaching us, so I turned to look, but saw nothing. When I turned, SNK asked why, because they hadn't heard a thing. And no, my ears aren't especially sharp. Seeing nothing, we were all still very sure that there was something there. We walked faster, around a corner, and ended up where the last lot before we turned again to get back to her street, where there was a vacant field. The houses there hadn't been built yet. We all stopped in our tracks, absolutely certain that we were facing whatever had been following us, though we still saw nothing. Well, two of us saw nothing. Later, Kay stated she saw what she described as a hellhound with two heads. We believed her. I know what I heard, and the feeling, well, no denying it if you were there. We took off running, pell-mell down the street till we reached S.'s porch. We didn't go inside right away, not wanting to have to explain why we were so freaked out, but remained on the porch. The thing, the hound, whatever it was, we could still feel it watching us from an area across the street. As at this point was reciting Bible verses, and we were all praying, and I swear you could feel it retreat. Not gone, but not able to come closer. Subjective, you say? Well, sure. Very, very real, though. An animal right in your face could feel no more threatening. After a while, we did go inside and prayed more, still very shaken and scared. S had her Bible and located another one for Kay to hold, and not wanting me empty-handed, offered a small cross made of alabaster or mother of pearl or something similar. I clutched it like a rope tossed to a drowning person. Oddly, I started noticing a heat in my hand, the one holding the cross. A lot of heat. So much it should burn, but it didn't. I opened my hand and looked, and emanating from the cross was the most amazing light, pure white, like nothing I've ever seen before. Got my friends' attention, and they saw it as well, and we all started feeling quite safe and much calmer. It was like the light was a message, a sort of "don't worry, you're safe in my hands" sort of thing. And we were. We slept after a time, seeing a glow then in the corner at the ceiling by the door. We all felt this was an angel sent to keep us safe. Next day, we found claw marks on a fence outside and odd partial prints in some dirt, as if from a large dog. I see this whole thing as a lesson of sorts. Still, the hellhounds and supernatural, I really don't like it at all. Invisible creepy dogs hit a bit close to home. Well, and I almost forgot. Remember I mentioned the brother of S was camping with a friend? Well, before we slept, he and the friend showed up at the house, saying they decided not to camp because some animal or other, they never saw it, was stalking their campsite. They finally got spooked enough they came back. Hearing our story, they were glad they did.